Welcome and thank you, everybody. My name is Sunitha Angelville, and I'm president of the Washington State Bar Association. It is a fitting end to my presidency that I am able to be here to introduce a new beginning and a new opportunity for all of you. And I'm so excited and pleased to be able to introduce our panelists in this venture. Lawyers in the Classroom is a resource we are providing as part of our Rule of Law Ambassador program. Every lawyer automatically becomes a Rule of Law Ambassador when they take their professional oath. And we have heard passionately from our WISBA leaders and from members across the state that legal professionals need resources and tools to do this critical work in their communities. As ambassadors, we need to educate and dispel misinformation. We need, especially about the court system, we need to defend our rule of law. And most importantly, we need to build meaningful relationships to fight the erosion of trust and confidence in our democratic institutions. I feel these responsibilities deeply, and I know you do too. And when I think about what concrete steps we can take to educate and build relationships, there's nothing that feels as direct and impactful as supporting students and teachers. It's what I call an upstream approach. And I can only imagine the positive changes that might come about in the next decade and beyond if we have a robust core of legal professionals in classrooms across the state. The change would not only be in civic lessons and legal learning, but in relationships, as our children build connections with actual judges and lawyers, see the diversity of people and jobs in the legal field, and begin to think, there are people like me in my community working for justice for all. So again, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm hopeful this is your first step towards a mutually beneficial and joyful partnership with a local school. I also want to mention that the time that you spend volunteering for Lawyers in the Classroom can be submitted as pro bono hours annually. So win-win. I'm going to turn it over now to the experts. These are the leaders behind the successful Judges in the Classroom project, created and administered by the Board for Judicial Administration's Public Engagement and Education Committee and facilitated by the Administrative Office of the Courts. The Lawyers in the Classroom program is drawing from their successes, and we are so very grateful that they are our partners. Please welcome, in the order that they will speak, Nicole Ack, who is a senior court program analyst for the Administrative Office of the Courts, serving as both a member and staff support to the BJA's Public Engagement and Education Committee, as well as supporting other civics-based educational efforts. She is a former public school teacher and Superior Court ADR director and mediator. Catherine Loring sits on the San Juan County Superior Court and serves as a chair of the BJA's Public Engagement and Education Committee. She is a longtime school volunteer, including mentoring students and presenting as part of Judges in the Classroom. Cecily Hazelrig is Chief Judge of Division I of the Washington Court of Appeals. She represents the Court of Appeals on the Public Engagement and Education Committee and is a regular presenter with the Judges in the Classroom and Legislative Scholars Program. If you have any questions during the presentation, please use the chat feature that will allow you to submit your questions to the host. We will gather those to address at the end of the program. And now I will ask Nicole to take it away.
Thank you, Sunitha, and thank you, Sarah. Good afternoon, everybody. I want to thank all of the WSBA for partnering with us to make Lawyers in the Classroom a reality. Thank you to the judges who I think are the main event in the presentation here. I'll be brief. Who, as part of the model for LITC, for 30 years almost now, have been participating in the Judges in the Classroom program. And thank you to all the lawyers for your support for extending and expanding civic education's reach, starting with the K through 12 classrooms in our communities. Briefly, let me speak as a teacher. My first experience with a judge in the classroom was with a friend who was part of the Judges in the Classroom program and had attended the school I taught at. It was a Title I, high poverty, 90% poverty school. And it was personal for him to go there and for the students to see someone who had gone to that school, a school where it was rare for a student to end up going to college, much less law school, much less become a judge. That kind of representation and possibility for students, I think, matters as much as the lessons themselves. My next Judges in the Classroom program included a very specific lesson called Ways to Solve a Problem. I used it with fifth graders at that time of year, the beginning of the year, when we spend really weeks getting students used to procedures and protocols and ways to deal with conflict. This lesson has as its objectives learning about formal types of problem solving practices, arbitration, litigation, negotiation, mediation. And it led to an organic discussion about student-based problem solving, taking turns, rock, paper, scissors, pushing someone in the playground. And we got to talk about what works best and what keeps them in control and what gives control over to teachers or principals or their parents. Our shared desire to engage directly and educate the next generation, specifically about the judicial branch and generally about civics, is a partnership I'm very happy to be part of. And thank you all for being here. I'll talk to specifics after the judges get a chance to speak. And with that, I'll turn it over to Judge Loring. Thank you.
Great. Well, thanks, Nicole, and thanks for everyone being here to find out more about judges and now lawyers in the classroom. We are just excited to have this partnership and excited to expand the impact. So I've been on the bench now 8 years, started in 2018 here in San Juan County and joined public engagement and education, I believe in the beginning of 2019. And right away, I was excited about this program. I wanted to get into classrooms. As you heard, I'm in San Juan County. Our population is small. So our population year round is under 19,000. And on the island where I live, it's around 8,500. And so nobody here knew about judges in the classroom, and I certainly wasn't going to rely on folks to sign up through the formal program where you request a judge to come to your classroom. So I had to figure out how to get into classrooms on my own, and I quickly reached out directly to schools essentially anywhere within the county. And specifically first on San Juan Island, I reached out to the public school, but then also the schools on Orcas and Lopez as well, and developed relationships. And that really is the key to all of this, is creating those relationships. And so specifically on the school on San Juan Island, the high school, I created a pattern of going, I think at first once a year on Constitution Day or for Constitution Day, but then later would go a couple of times a year, depending on what the civics teacher was teaching in terms of their year-long curriculum. And so I personally reached out at the high school level. That was my comfort level, and reached out to civics teachers or government teachers at the different schools. But it really is up to you and your comfort level and or your personal connections where you choose to go. As you're going to see, if you haven't already, there are lessons at every level of classroom. And you can also, not use a lesson at all and just talk directly with the classroom. So it's really up to you. I was most comfortable and most confident having a lesson plan that I could go in prepared with. And so I'm going to show you one in a minute. But there's all types of lessons and you can decide what feels good to you. I also worked to update the lessons with our committee. And so in 2019, we updated all the lessons, but that gave me the opportunity to kind of check and see all the different lessons that we have. So those that have resonated with me and that I've used personally have been search and seizure in the school setting, First Amendment or freedom of expression rights in the school setting, and then drug testing in the school setting. And you'll notice that a lot of the lessons focus on students' rights in particular, which they are super excited to engage in and talk about. So those are lessons that I have found that have worked well and just have resonated well. The way that I have approached this is that once I have that relationship with the teacher, and sometimes those change, right? A couple of our schools have a lot of turnover, so you might have to keep reaching out. But I've given the teacher the option of which lessons plan they prefer within a few. Usually I'll give a few options and then let them decide in terms of what fits with their teaching and their curriculum. And then as you look at the lesson itself, and I'll pull one up in a minute, some of them have recommended pre-reading or pre-teaching. And so checking with that teacher to ask if they're comfortable doing that pre-teaching. If not, you can adjust what you're going to do. But usually there's some introduction into the appropriate rights, applicable rights, maybe a couple of the cases. I'm always shocked to hear how much detail teachers are teaching in high school about specific con law cases. So they might already be doing it anyway. And then some of the lessons have specific handouts, many of them do. And so working with the teacher in advance to make sure that they print out those handouts or circulate it in whatever way works for their classroom setting. And then you'll see that most of the lessons at the high school level will have some, after you do your intro teaching about whatever the right is and sort of the range of what that means, we'll have some hypothetical. And the usually it will call for sort of two sides or two arguments or two positions. And so most of them ask you to break the classroom up either into just two sides or perhaps into small groups to argue the two positions. And then I think in every one that I've done, students break up into those groups, work through the hypothetical. They're asked to rank their arguments, and they're assigned their position as a lawyer is, right? They don't get to necessarily pick which position they want to argue. And then they're asked to make their best arguments and then present those to the group. And we work through that together in terms of presenting the arguments. The kids talk about what they think are strongest or weakest, what they think the outcome should be. And then most of the hypotheticals actually are based on a historical case. And so then I can explain, here's what happened in the real case, and here's what the outcome was. And do you think that is right or not? And people will have opinions. So let me go ahead and share my screen and just kind of walk you through. I'm not going to go through in detail because they're quite detailed, but I will just show you a little bit of what you can expect. Sorry. Here we go. Okay, so this is one of the lessons, and I think Nicole, when Nicole was speaking, they shared the website, and so you can navigate between lessons and then you can download them. So this is in a downloaded form. It'll always have sort of where the source came from, when it was updated, what the learning objectives are, which is so important, the grade level, so you can know who your target audience is, what the time expectation is. And so this again is the search and seizure one. And this specific lesson has an option for one class or two class sessions. And depending on what was possible, I've done both. There are some government classes that will even have like a longer meeting time, like 90 minutes that I've worked with. And so the one that's intended for two class sessions could be perfect for that. And so in this particular one, there's a handout for the optional activity that I created based on a Court of Appeals case on search warrants. The lesson suggests you could also take an example search warrant that you've worked on. I felt like it was a little more comfortable to take one from this case that was really well articulated in terms of the standards for cell phone searches, which kids were really interested about. So again, it has the optional activity. It talks about expectations about what the teacher has already taught. So that's helpful for you to know and communicate. And then it really goes through step by step so that you don't have to, be comfortable creating any of the individual talking points with how you can present to the class. So there are direct step by step, including the different standards to explain. In this in particular is about search and seizures in terms of the range of standards. I still would recommend, kind of digging into it to your comfort level, including later on, there's the optional activity, but then there's other cases cited, and so it's just up to you. My personal approach has been to print some of the cases and then make sure that if we finish early, I have some related questions for the students about how might this apply in a different setting, or what would happen at the state level versus the federal level, right? Just trying to get them to think about different iterations or different possibilities following the lesson. So here's a little bit, and you could decide how much detail to go into in terms of exceptions to the search warrant requirements. And depending on your personal experience, you could go further down that road or not. And then again, there's some additional optional talking points depending on how far you get. So I will stop sharing. I know that's a lot of text, but just wanted to kind of introduce you to what it would look like, and that there are step-by-step talking points for your lesson. And at the same time, there's plenty of room for creativity and making it what you want to be. We did update the lessons in 2019. If anyone sees issues or things that need to be updated further, as we all know, the law is always evolving. So please let us know if you see an issue that we haven't ourselves flagged. We would really appreciate that. And if anyone's interested in working on updating lessons, or if you have a suggestion for some new lesson, all of those are greatly appreciated, and we can use those information points and you as a partner in our committee work. Let's see, I want to make sure I'm not missing anything. I guess I know we're going to have a little more dialogue later, but I would just end my time with saying, I can physically remember, every time I leave the classroom, and for me, the high school is like, a block away from the courthouse. Walking back, I always just feel uplifted. It is so nice to get into the community, get to interact with students, and feel like, democracy is real and alive, and has a future in the young people coming up. So it's just always a positive experience, and I encourage you to try it. Thanks so much. I'm turning it over to Judge Hazelrigg. Sorry about that.
Thank you. So I'm going to sort of fill in a different piece of the puzzle to hopefully complement Judge Loring's presentation. Just for some background, this is also my 7th year with Peak. I also started in January of 2019, shortly after I was elected to the Court of Appeals. I think this is kind of the end of my 2nd year as the co-chair of the K-12 Civics Ed subcommittee of Peak, which is where we house judges in the classroom and also legislative scholars and other civics outreach programs. And so this was, but I served on the subcommittee since the beginning of my time with Peak. And part of it has to do with the experience that Judge Loring just described in terms of being able to connect with students and the inspiration I think that we get from connecting with those younger members of our communities, but also just because of my particular background. I'm a woman of mixed ethnicity. I'm Chicana and an Anglo. I'm a first-gen attorney. I did my undergraduate work in cultural studies, and actually taught as an adjunct instructor at the Fairhaven College of Interdisciplinary Studies, teaching cultural studies for about 8 years. I've also been a super active parent volunteer in Skagit and Whatcom public schools for my now adult children who also have multifaceted identities along gender, sexuality, ethnicity, nationality. And so this is something that kind of kept me connected to those values as I entered the judiciary. That being said, I think one of the messages that I'd like to convey, again, kind of rooted in that framework, is to help you prepare for the gravity of the undertaking in terms of volunteering in the classrooms. I mean, I think we're all very aware that proximity to youth and students, particularly from a position of power, right? Doesn't have to be as a judicial officer, a member of the bar, an officer of the court. That's still a position of relative social power, that we have the potential to do great good. We also have the potential to, unintentionally do some harm. And so what I hope is to encourage you to sort of develop a hyper consciousness to that aspect of going into the community as members of the bar, as representatives of this WSBA program, which is really powerful and important. And just kind of generally the need for a high degree of self-awareness, self-regulation, humility. If the humility part doesn't come naturally, the children will bring it to you. So be ready for that too. And I would encourage you to spend some time considering and even kind of engaging in dialogue with respected members of your community about your privilege, and maybe identifying some of your own understanding gaps based on lived experience. How comfortable are you talking about race and ethnicity, gender, sexuality, socioeconomic status? Because I can assure you that these younger generations are very, very comfortable, and they will ask, right? Which I think is fantastic. And I want to encourage their curiosity and their critical thought process about these things. And if it's something that you don't feel, that you feel like you could use more preparation on, what are resources available in your community, both professionally and personally, to help build competence in cross-cultural communication, right? Because part of it is just about bridging understanding gaps. And ideally, as litigators, as practitioners of the law, we have a little bit more preparation than other communities might have in terms of effective communication, especially across difference, right? Because we want to be open, welcoming, bringing these kids into this material. And again, recognizing that communication with children is very different than communication with opposing counsel and clients and things like that. And so one of the things that's interesting about my experience as a complement to Judge Loring's experience is that I've actually never taught a judges in the classroom lesson plan. And part of that is based on my teaching background, my experience with youth of various ages. So I felt very comfortable addressing the teacher's specific requests. So I've presented on just telling the story of my path to the bench, talking about the state judiciary, and teaching about that structurally. One of the presentations that I do every year is for Constitution Day at a elementary school here in Seattle where Division I is housed. And in that lesson, I just developed my own lesson plan that kind of compares and contrasts the federal and state constitutions, tells the story of how our state constitution was created and approved. And then I work in a little bit of the structure of the state judiciary. Last year, because it was an election year, I also talked about judicial elections and how Washington is somewhat distinct in the election process for judicial officers and the special rules around that. I would sort of second Judge Loring's recommendation that of not offering a tailored lesson until maybe you've tried out a couple of prepared lessons a few times, or alternatively, if you have teaching experience prior to this program. I think the biggest thing to emphasize, especially when working with youth, right, whether they're younger children or adolescents, patience, right? Intelligent but child appropriate responses. One of the things is I've always been teased a little bit by my siblings that I talk to kids like they're grown-ups. You adjust or mitigate maybe the content, but meet them at their level and honor their intelligence. Be prepared to use redirection. I use very positive redirection. When I did a Constitution Day program a couple of weeks ago, you just start getting the little popcorn questions about where do you live and what was it like when you grew up? And it's like, that's great. We can talk about that later, and then pivot, right? And so being ready for that, keeping it, again, very positive. And remembering too that your humanity is one of the biggest benefits of participating in a program like this. Your presence, your story may be the inspiration that starts a child on a journey to being a once-in-a-century litigator, to being a community leader or organizer, to being a judicial officer that changes lives. So remember that maybe release a little bit of the polish that we would normally take into the courtroom and let your humanity shine through, because it's extraordinarily powerful. In terms of the prep for the types of questions we get, I think we have an image that we can share. They're all over the map. The biggest question I get is about the gavel, and it's wildly disappointing because at the Court of Appeals, our bailiffs use the gavel, not us. They always want to know about our hardest case, our favorite case. How did you decide to become a judge, or in this case, a lawyer? What was law school like? And they're fantastic. And you can decide how much personal information you want to share about those things, right? To quickly answer a couple of the questions that have popped up, in my experience, these are one-off presentations. Now, they might be one-offs that are repeated throughout the year, especially like in a high school level where a class might be offered in multiple semesters. So I wouldn't necessarily anticipate sort of a standing attendance issue. And I'll let Nicole maybe handle the question about street law. We've got two of those because there is a bit of an overlap. So I will turn it back to Nicole.
Thanks so much, Judge Hazelrig. Street law is still run out of Seattle by my predecessor, Margaret Fisher, as far as I know, and a different program, high school level. I believe it's a quarter commitment by the attorney to go in and work once a week with those students. And that's about as much as I know about it, to be honest, because when Margaret left, she took that program with her. What I just like to say to come back to how you can participate is it's as simple as just sending me an email. Put lawyers in the classroom or LITC in the subject line. Let me know the geographic area you're interested in participating in. You know, some people may have a 206 area code, but they really are somewhere else and that's where they want to be. And what I'll do when I get requests from teachers for a lawyer, and we're just starting really to advertise this, is send out in a geographic area email saying who's available for this, and then I'll help facilitate it. I'll work as a liaison between you and the teacher. If and when you just want to do it directly after the initial introduction, great. I'm just available to help. And to reiterate what the judges have said, you're going to get into a classroom much more quickly and more often if you reach out to schools that you have a relationship with, either because you went there, a child went there, a niece, a nephew, it's in your neighborhood, etc. And I'm happy to help with choosing lessons or anything at all. So with that, I want to just thank everyone again for being part of our shared goal of an engaged and educated citizenry, starting with the youngest generation. And back to the WSBA folks.
We're here. Did either of the judges want to mention anything about how, I know you've talked a little bit, especially about how you have made those outreaches specifically to schools in your area?
Just briefly, one of the projects that we did with judges in the classroom, the entirety of my time in working with it, was collaborating with OSBI, doing all sorts of different outreach through community connections, but we worked to build our pool of judges. And I was explaining earlier that one of the things that I did when I joined the court, I represent Skagit, Whatcom Island, and San Juan counties. I, over a course of several years, emailed every single middle school and high school vice principal and principal and told them about the program every couple of years. And, you know, that's 4 counties. There are 39. I just took responsibility for the ones I represent. But in my experience, that direct outreach is really impactful. Like Nicole was saying, if you have a personal connection, the Constitution Day presentation that I do every year actually was sort of a cold inquiry that came through the Judges in the Classroom program. And even though I live in Skagit, I work in Seattle, and so it was an easy one for me to go do. And now we have a relationship where the teachers just email me directly every year.
And let me answer a question so it's on the recording for anybody else who listens to this. Just by virtue of being on here, someone is not automatically signed up to be a volunteer. I have about 15 already, but that took actually writing to me, and then we write back, and I include our administrative staff, and the WSBA is aware that you're on there. So please reach out and do so. And if you do reach out to schools directly, I sure would appreciate knowing. And I know the WSBA is really interested in well as tracking and debriefing if you want on how it goes and any help with materials that we can assist you with.
Nicole, just on that last point, do we know who's going to actually keep track? Is it going to be WSBA, or are we going to keep a list of who went where, who connected where?
I think it's going to be both. I know that the WSBA is very interested in knowing. Certainly we need to, because we're making the connections. Please
Yeah, I'm
clarify
just
if I'm not right about that, Sarah.
I was just responding to one of the questions in the question and answer, was should folks reach out to local schools on their own and reference the program? And at what point do they loop in Nicole or WSBA? So it sounds like, yes, feel comfortable reaching out to local schools, and please let both Nicole and Sarah know, and they can let each other know if there might be a question as to who got notice. I
My
think so much just to,
understanding, oh, sorry, my understanding is that we would love you to be in schools, and you just heard about there's a lot of places for creativity and whatnot, but I hope you know there's a lot of support too, because I think it can be kind of terrifying to be like, I'm just gonna call up and do what? So if you have connections, if you're kind of comfortable, great. Even then, I think it would be really, really helpful. Like Nicole said, basically this program is run by you let Nicole know that you're one of the people and you're interested. And it would be so great if you kept Nicole in the loop, and like Nicole's going to be our buddy, and we'll make sure that we know as well. You know, I think for just in terms of who's using it, what does it look like? Here are the names who've been comfortable. I think if you consider lawyers in the classroom, the official way to be part of it is to contact and email Nicole, and then lean on, sorry, Nicole, I'll say lean on Nicole, who can lean on us to just be as supportive as you want and need us to be. That would be great.
Thank
And
you,
somebody,
Sarah. That makes
Yeah.
total sense. And I think it adds legitimacy. It makes it easier for the lawyer to get into the classroom. If they see that someone from the administrative office of the courts, from the Washington State courts, is copied, and the link to the program that goes to the court website shows all the lessons involved, etc. And it may get the teacher thinking, that's great, and I actually would like it to be about this particular lesson.
one of the questions in the chat was about partnering with another lawyer, which I think is great. Before joining the bench, I coached the government class mock trial with another lawyer. So we partnered because I agree that you can support each other, and you can also more easily, I think, create dialogue with students when there's two of you. I think that can be great. I think we will have to see, but it makes sense to me that we might create a listserv among lawyers who have signed up, so that someone could say, hey, I'm in this area. Does someone want to partner with me? These are all kind of new iterations that I frankly don't think we've talked about, but that could work really well so people can connect with each other. So I'm just approaching that on the fly, but I think that would be a great idea. And then there was also a question, is it okay to reference private or to reach out to private schools? So yes, I mean, there's no reason this has to be a public school program. It's a state program, and civics education is for everyone. I've reached out to a private school here. I haven't managed to connect with the right person, but absolutely, I mean, there's no reason that it should be limited that I'm aware of. But I don't know if others have different thoughts.
I brought this up, we were actually in kind of a tribal setting, and I even heard there was great interest if you want to reach out to tribal schools. Now, of course, you might want to look at the lesson plans and really be prepared for like what some of that interface was, but I think any education settings is Great. And then I'm looking through these. Are you seeing those pop-up panelists? I'm going to ask this question. I know there was one that said, for someone who's an attorney who's just starting out, do you think there's a place for them, like still to go share their pathway there? And is this a suitable and valuable experience for someone at that level?
I think absolutely. One of the things that I often do with my Constitution Day presentation at the elementary school is I bring my law clerks, and I have them talk about sort of a case flow, like what's an appeal. And it's a great opportunity for them to practice presentation skills. They're also, just out of law school usually and have maybe don't even have their bar results yet. But I think it's a fantastic skill to practice. I think it also sets a tone for incorporating service throughout one's career. And so I would definitely encourage even the youngest attorneys to jump in and participate if they have the capacity.
And based on your experience and comfort level, you can pick both the grade level and the lesson plan that you're most comfortable with. So, some of the constitutional topics can be sort of broad, et cetera. And so you can pick whatever you're most comfortable and really make sure that you feel confident in that area that you choose.
And I just want to jump up to a question that's in the chat about the challenge is often getting an invitation when teachers are so busy fulfilling curriculum requirements and advice for gaining access to classrooms. I think that's where building those relationships comes into play, because one of the challenges we have with Constitution Day is it's right at the very beginning of the school year. And there's so much chaos and so much, just kind of fundamentals that are happening at that point in the year. But I would just say, regular reminders about interest and availability can kind of plant that seed that might not necessarily come to fruition that academic year, but possibly the next. And also remembering that there's flexibility. One of the things that happened with COVID lockdown was we actually had greater access to classrooms because we could Zoom in. And so if it's too hard to kind of coordinate an on-site visit, for example, sometimes they'll combine classrooms. And so that takes a little bit of extra prep. If it's easier for someone to just click a Zoom call so that you can be with the students that way, that works too. So offer some alternatives and some options when you're having this communication.
I see a question that I want to reiterate that we have really looked at this and said these squarely fall under like pro bono hours, like law improvement. Somebody asked about CLE, and I know that we had previously asked our MCLE folks, and they said generally if you're presenting to non-lawyer groups, that's not really a CLE. But the question about the preparation and the presentation behind the scene, let me go back and specifically ask that. We have been collecting the FAQs, and I will get back to this group, and we can have that living in the head of Nicole and others as you engage with this.
So there is a question in the question and answer, and we haven't really talked about sort of politics and the way that some of these issues are politically charged. So there's a question about how do you teach about federal constitutional protections, given that they may be or are changing with current administration and political environment. The purpose of this right is to really ground people in the rule of law and the protections that are founded in our Constitution and related, law. From my perspective, if doing it in this current environment, I would just be leaning into the law. So referencing the specific constitutional provisions, referencing the case law, talking about how cases are interpreted. And I always feel like any of the presentations, a really key part is explaining how the law evolves, that different decisions interpret past decisions and evolve. And so I would try to ground it in explaining how the law works and where those foundational principles come from, versus trying to speak to or speculate about current political pressures and where any one thing might be going. That's how I would approach it. I think we really want to focus on the rule of law rather than sort of the political environment, but that's my take.
And what an absolutely important time. You know, our take at the WSBA, because we do have a rule of law ambassador program, and this is like one of the, what we called it, like the upstream way to just really be getting into that next generation. But, you know, I think that what one of our goals is to really try to say, talking about the rule of law and the intention of the Constitution as a founding document is nonpartisan, right? And I believe we all have the good judgment to know where that can stray or not stray. You know, it's not like we're going to say, well, this is right or that is wrong, but the ideal of the rule of law in a constitutional democracy and what that means, why judicial independence is so important, why the three branches, like that is so critical right now. And the fact that some people are trying to say, like, no, it's nonpartisan, that's just one of the most important civics lessons we can give to our students. There is a question that it says a lot of this is aimed at K-12. Nicole or others, have you ever thought about something for universities or undergrad students?
We have, we being the Court of Appeals, do traveling court, and I lead traveling court for Division I. And so we have done it with a local community college as well as Western Washington University. And again, it's based on those relationships. You know, I used to teach at Western, and so that was an easy one. I went to Skagit, so that was an easy one. And we do some pretty heavy academic tie-ins as well as holding oral argument at the university or community college, doing a Q&A afterwards. And so it's a little bit different because the student needs are different. The availability is different, right? You're not, if your teacher if your instructor decides they want to give you credit for attending some other community event, that's well and good. That they're not bound by the same curriculum requirements as public school instruction. So we've not focused on that with regard to peak in particular, but there are other things out there that are happening that are connecting higher education with the courts.
And like Judge Hazelrick said, so much is about relationships. A few years back, members of the Public Engagement Education Committee were asked to, guest present at an ethics class at SU Law School, and they're, based on relationships and tie-ins, et cetera. But there's no, so those are all kind of individual applications depending on those relationships and opportunities, but there's no specific intention to create a curriculum at this point in the college setting.
I think we're going to turn it back to Sunita for like her last official last closing words. There's a lot of thank you. Thanks in the chat right now. And I just want to say that to you officially as well, just by being interested and showing up and learning. I am so hopeful that you will parlay this and get yourself into a classroom and tell your friends and grab another friend and get yourself into the classroom. I hope you've heard that this is somewhat flexible, meaning that if you see something that you would like to add or curriculum, let us know, or if you've got thoughts or ideas. And tell me if I'm wrong, Nicole, but it seems like the way that you do this is you use that contact information I put in there, and you basically email Nicole and said, I'm ready and I would like to do this. You will get on a list, and we are going to do a lot of efforts in the back end to let teachers know it's there. So Nicole may reach out and say, like, you're up. But also on that other end, if you really want to kind of look in your community at those connections and put yourself out there, Nicole, and she can reach out to us, would just love to support you. If you want to go into a tribal classroom and would like a tribal law practitioner, like, we can hook you up. We will look for those things. Go out, the sky's the limit. Start forming those connections.
I
Thank
think
you for
that's
everyone.
absolutely right, Sarah. And if you contact schools that you're interested in or teachers, just copy me, let them know you're part of this program. You'd be delighted to come in and help them as you can, talking about your experience using one of the lessons, whatever they're working on. I think that'll be really helpful.
And finally, I just really want to recognize Ms. Ack, Judge Loring, Judge Hazelrig. Thank you for giving us the most precious gift of all, which is your time and your experience and your knowledge. I think this has been so inspiring, and I'm just really excited and proud to be here. And I'm feeling that a lot of people on this Zoom screen feel the same way. So we thank you so much. This work is so important, and we all need to be doing it. So with
Thank you so
that,
much
I'm
for
going
having
to,
us.
of course, and with that, I'm going to close. I think folks know from the chat where they can reach out, and to whom they can reach out. So, and as on behalf of the bar, I also want to thank our staff at the bar. Sarah Nagowski, and her team has just done, as usual, an outstanding job of supporting. So thank you so much to WISPA staff. Hope everybody stays safe and healthy out there, and we'll see you again soon.